Hey everybody, welcome to the second last Phyrexia All Will Be One set review on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to take a look at all of the green cards in Phyrexia All Will Be One. Keep in mind, of course, this is a limited set review. We're not talking about any constructed formats, my opinions, I haven't played with these cards, yada yada yada. And let's get going with Adaptive Spore Singer. Adaptive Spore Singer is 2 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Druid at common. It's a 2/2 with Vigilance. When it ETBs, pick one. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains Vigilance until end of turn, or Proliferate. This seems like just above filler, sort of very glue for the green deck. You're certainly going to want to be playing these. You're not really going to be spending real picks on them. I really like the versatility here that it is a 2/2 for 3, which kind of sucks. But if you don't have a bunch of stuff or anything relevant to proliferate, hey, something can get +2/+2 and maybe get in for a vigilant attack. But if you do have stuff to proliferate, then this will do that. That said, you're not spending a real pick on these. You can probably get these pretty close to the wheel. Don't spend a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, probably not even a sixth pick on these. And of course, this is a good reminder of how this grade system works. Remember, your 6th through 8th pick, even your wheel picks, pick 9, pick 10, will sometimes make your deck, or perhaps even often make your deck. This is not a spectrum of good to bad. It is a spectrum of how to draft well. Up next is Armored Scrap Gorger. Armored Scrap Gorger is 1 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Beast at uncommon. It's an 0/3. It gets +3/+0 as long as it has 3 oil counters on it. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and whenever it becomes tapped, exile target card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on Armored Scrap Gorger. Several notes here. Or 2, I guess. First off, this is not a May ability. If you tap this for any reason, or it becomes tapped for any reason, you absolutely must exile a card from your graveyard or an opponent's graveyard. There's not too much graveyard shenanigans going on, so it's probably not going to hurt you too much if you have to exile something from yours. Just be aware you cannot not do this. Secondly, that entire paragraph at the bottom doesn't happen if there is no target. So if both graveyards are empty, you don't get to put oil counters on this. Keep that in mind. This card is fantastic. 2 mana, any color mana dork. I'm already in. It's already a very high pick for me. And the fact that when that kind of becomes less relevant later in the game, this has an incredibly good chance of being just a 3/3 that I paid 2 mana for. This card's fantastic. I'm going to pick it very highly. Probably upwards in the 2nd, 3rd pick range, maybe around 3rd-ish, but this card's going to be fantastic, and I want as many as possible. Up next is Bloated Contaminator. Bloated Contaminator is 2 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Beast at rare. It's a 4/4 with Trample, Toxic 1, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, Proliferate, which means it kind of has Toxic 2. This just looks like a bog standard green creature with big power and low casting cost at rare. It's very good. You'll first pick this. It's not quite in bomb territory. It's just extraordinarily efficient at what it does. You will very much play as many of these as you can get your hands on. The card's fantastic. Easy first pick here. Up next is Branch Blight Stalker. Branch Blight Stalker is 1 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Elf Scout at common. It's a 3/1 with Toxic 2. There are blades everywhere in this format. 3/1s for 2, my favorite stats. And this has Toxic 2. If your opponent stumbles in any way, shape, or form, I think green is going to poison people to death very quickly. And in fact, I saw that yesterday while I was chat judging the pre-release over at Loading Ready Run. Yeah. Getting poisoned is very real. That said, you're not picking these highly. These are, relatively filler, slightly better than filler. You're spending the 6th through 8th, maybe even the wheel pick on this, but you'll probably play about as many as you can get your hands on. Up next is Canker Bloom. Canker Bloom is 1 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Fungus at uncommon. It's a 3/2. Pay 1 and sacrifice it to choose 1. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or proliferate. Another very good green card. We're starting off on just real good stuff in green. Green might be pretty powerful here, especially if this keeps up. A 3/2 for 2 is already great Mana cost stats ratio, hey, it's 1 better than a 3/1 for 2. And the versatility of just having a naturalize or on command proliferate is going to be very solid as well. This falls a little bit, it's in the 4th, 5th pick range. You're not first picking this. You're not picking this quite as highly as like a Scrap Gorger, for example, but you'll still pick it up well before the wheel and of course play as many as you can. Up next is Carnivorous Canopy. Carnivorous Canopy is 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. If that permanent's value was 3 or less, proliferate. Well, they can't all be super duper fantastic, but this is still, pretty dang good sideboard card. You probably should never main deck this. I just don't think there's enough artifacts in the set. And it doesn't really look like there's enough flyers. There's ways that you can deal with that with good cards in your main deck. Keep this in the sideboard when your opponent does show that they have a bunch of artifacts or very powerful artifacts. When they have a bunch of flyers or very powerful flyers or some very powerful enchantments, side this in. It'll be great, but leave it in the sideboard, which means you can pick these up on the wheel very regularly. Up next is Conduit of Worlds. Conduit of Worlds is 2 green for an artifact at rare. You may play lands from your graveyard. Tap, choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This is interesting to me, but it's very strongly going to depend on how fast the format is. It is 4 mana, literally do nothing artifact. You may be in a situation where you just don't have permanents in your graveyard. You draw this card and it is utterly dead, and it's just not going to help you do anything extra. Those are cards that I tend to very strongly dislike because I want very consistent draft decks. I want my draft decks to do kind of the same thing game in, game out, and be decent. I don't want to high roll and low roll game to game. Now, if the format does turn out to be a little bit slow and you can play this as kind of your only thing that you've played that turn, and then start pulling stuff out of your graveyard as your only spell that turn, which is unfortunate because typically a lot of the stuff in your graveyard, early to mid game is going to be the low cost stuff that you played early. And so you might not be spending all of your mana, but you're spending your entire turn because you can't cast anything else after you pull something out. Then, this card could be good if you are allowed to do that in this format. Based on my first reading of cards, based on the pre-release, I think this format's going to be pretty dang aggressive and fast, and I think if you play this, even on curve, you're probably falling way behind and are dead. So I'm going to start out not playing this. I'm actually going to put it way down in kind of the F territory. We'll see how the format evolves, but I don't think you have time to play this, unfortunately. Up next is Contagious Vorak. Contagious Vorak is 2 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Boar Beast at common. It's a 3/3. When it ETBs, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card in your hand this way, proliferate. In case you were wondering, the answer is 10. There are 10 lines of text on this common. This common that only a few short years ago would have been exactly the same, except all of those words would have been flavor text. This card's fantastic. It's a Centaur Courser. It's a 3/3 for 3, which is super duper efficient on stats and cost. And you get to just grab a land card if you can find one in your top 4. That's sometimes not good because you can whiff, but you can't even whiff on this because you get to proliferate. This card's really, really good. You're going to pick these quite highly in the high 6th through 8th range or the low 4th, 5th pick range. Very good common. We're barely into the green set review, and I expect this might just be the best green common. Stupid good. Up next is Copper Longlegs. Copper Longlegs is 1 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Spider at common. It's a 1/3 with reach. Pay 1 and a green, sacrifice Copper Longlegs, proliferate. This seems like a decent enough main board card because it's got that versatility of, it's a 1/3 that can block your flyers that are a problem. And then if they don't have flyers and you don't need this blocker and you want to proliferate, which I think green's going to want to do, you've got that option as well. There's going to be a lot of games where this is just an on-board 1 quote-unquote damage to your opponent to take them from 9 to 10 poison and kill them. This seems totally okay to main deck. I'm not going to ever spend a real pick on it. This is definitely in the low 6th through 8th or even the wheel area. And some amount of the times I will sideboard this out or sideboard this in, depending on number of flyers. So totally versatile, totally fine card. Just don't spend a real pick on it. Up next is Evolved Spinoderm. Evolved Spinoderm is 2 green for a creature Phyrexian Beast at rare. It's a 5/5. It ETBs with 4 oil counters on it. It has Trample as long as it has 2 or fewer counters on it. Otherwise, it has Hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from it. Then, if it has no oil counters on it, sacrifice it. So it's a 5/5 Hexproof for 4 for 2 turns. Or I guess 3 turns, 2 full turns. At which point it then becomes trample-y, and then it goes away. You only get 1 turn of trampling. Luckily, green has a good amount of proliferate in it, so you can probably keep this around even a few more turns. But that's 4 turns, or I guess 3 attacks worth of a 5/5, and one of those turns is going to be trample. This card's really, really good. You will probably first pick this. We're going to be in the situation of some sort of crazy bomb on common, or if you're in paper, a foil better rare or something. But otherwise, you're going to first pick this, and it's going to be quite decent. Grab some proliferate, see what you can do to keep this around a little bit longer. But you might not even need to keep it around longer. Your opponent might just be dead. Up next is Evolving Adaptive. Evolving Adaptive is a single green mana for a creature Phyrexian Warrior at uncommon. It's a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. Each oil counter is essentially a +1/+1 counter for this. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than Evolving Adaptive, put an oil counter on Evolving Adaptive. This, of course, is the old mechanic Evolve from Return to Ravnica block. And this is basically Experiment 1. Except, of course, Experiment 1 was infinitely better because you could take 2 counters off to regenerate it. Yeah, this card is pretty good. Obviously, it is infinitely better on turn 1 than it is late in the game. It's not a great top deck, but it's still not awful. The other thing to be aware, if you're not familiar with Experiment 1, is don't expect this to casually be a 6/6 or a 7/7 or anything crazy. These tend to cap out around 4/4. But a 4/4 for 1, especially in a set where I can proliferate it and possibly get a few more counters onto it, this card's great. It's a very high pick. It's in the 2nd, 3rd pick range. Very good. You'll want as many as you can. Up next is Expand the Sphere. Expand the Sphere is 3 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Look at the top 6 cards of your library, put up to 2 land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you put fewer than 2 lands onto the battlefield this way, proliferate a number of times equal to the difference. This card also seems really good to me. 4 mana is slightly more than where I would like to be ramping. That's typically the ceiling for me. I want to ramp on turn 2 or 3. But 4 is still not bad, and we're getting double ramp here, which is great. But again, the versatility here is great. Let's say it's turn 8 and I've never missed a land drop. I don't want more lands, but this is 4 mana proliferate twice. That could be oil counters. Those oil counters might be +1/+1, sort of like Evolving Adaptive's oil counters. That could be poison counters. That could get corruption online. Tons of stuff to go on here. Lots of versatility. I'm going to pick this relatively highly too, probably in the 4th, 5th pick range, or on the high end of that. I'm taking removal. I'm taking bombs. I'm taking really good creatures. But this is going to be really good. It's also going to help you splash if you want to get a 3rd color in there. Yeah, card's really good. Up next is Green Sun's Twilight. Green Sun's Twilight is X and a green for a sorcery at rare. Reveal the top X cards of your library, choose a creature and or a land card from among them, put those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is 5 or more, instead put the chosen cards onto the battlefield or into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. No. Absolutely not. I think this card is very, very bad. I saw it played at the PPR and it looked very, very bad. It is just not worth a card in your deck to look at the top 3 or 4 cards and put a creature in your hand, that's not really worth a card. And it's not really worth a card to pay 6 or more mana into this to hope that you find something relevant to put onto the battlefield, because you're paying way more mana than the card that you're probably going to put in. This is limited. Your creatures are not, although these days this may not be true anymore, your creatures are not always crazy, not so awesome, great bombs that you have 4 copies of in your deck. You're almost always wildly overpaying for whatever you actually get off of this. I will simply never play this card. It's an F. It is bad, bad, bad in limited. I highly recommend you don't play it. Up next is Icker Spit Basilisk. Icker Spit Basilisk is 2 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Basilisk at common. It's a 1/3 with Death Touch and Toxic 1. A little bit expensive for what I want my kind of 1/3 Death Touch to be. Or I would want this to have reach or something. It's just a lot of mana for the words and the numbers on this card. I think it's just straight up filler. If you have gotten yourself some extra fight spells, I guess. But it's pretty costly here. So I think this is well into the wheel. You can probably play one and not feel bad about it, but I think you can find better cards than this. Up next is Incubation Sac. Incubation Sac is a single green mana for an artifact at uncommon. Incubation Sac enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. Pay 4 tap, remove an oil counter, create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token, activate only as a sorcery. This is a cute little mana sink. 4 mana for a 3/3 3 times. That'll gum up the board really, really, really well. And of course, with the Proliferate kicking around, you might get a 4th, maybe even a 5th Golem. At that point, we are talking about 21 mana worth of investment. So that might be a little pie in the sky, especially if the format's fast. But I think this is a fine enough card, especially because it's not bad in the late game, because you can just pay 5 mana if you draw this late and instantly have a 3/3. Is a 5 mana 3/3 good? No, but you then get another 3/3 the next turn and so on. So I think this card's fine. I think it's in the probably 4th, 5th pick range. It may go down if it turns out that you just have to be way more proactive in this format, which I think is a possibility, but I'm going to start picking these a little bit high in the 4th, 5th pick range. Up next is Infectious Bite. Infectious Bite is 1 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Each opponent gets a poison counter. Yeah, it's Rabid Bite. It's fantastic. This is great green removal. Plays amazingly well with a Death Toucher if you have it. But you're playing green. You've probably got something real big that can kill whatever is on the board. Plus, hey, random poison counter. And green definitely seems to want to be killing people with poison. This is a very high pick up in the 2nd, 3rd pick range. Up next is Lattice Blade Mantis. Lattice Blade Mantis is 3 and a green for a creature Phyrexian insect at common. It's a 4/3. Lattice Blade Mantis enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Whenever Lattice Blade Mantis attacks, you may remove an oil counter from it. If you do, untap it, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. 4 mana 4/3 is fine, but filler. And the fact that it can twice do kind of like a 5/4 vigilant attack is pretty nice. And of course, with Proliferate, maybe you can get that a few extra times. But still, it's in the filler range. You can probably pick this up on the wheel. I'm not going to feel bad playing multiples of these, but I don't think I'm running to play these, especially when the majority of green cards we've seen have just been amazing. Up next is Maze's Mantle. Maze's Mantle is 2 and a green for an enchantment aura at common. Flash enchant creature. When Maze's Mantle enters the battlefield, if enchanted creature has toxic, that creature gains hexproof until end of turn. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. No, I don't imagine this is good in any way, shape, or form. If you're playing a lot of toxic, this is kind of like a double Snakeskin Veil, but it's 3 mana. But I would need to be playing almost 100% toxic creatures. I do kind of like Flash +2/+2. That's actually slightly better than Dragon Scale Boon, although Dragon Scale Boon untapped, which was a huge part of it. I will expect that I might end up playing this once or twice throughout the entire lifespan of this format, but I'm never going to attempt to play this. This is pretty close to an F, deep into the wheel. Up next is Nissa, Ascended Animist. Nissa is 3 green, Phyrexian green. For a legendary planeswalker Nissa at Mythic, she starts with 7 loyalty counter. However, if you pay 2 life for one of those, she starts with 5. If you pay 2 life for both of those mana, she starts with 3. +1, create an XX green Phyrexian horror creature token where X is Nissa Ascended Animist's loyalty. So that's going to get you an 8/8, a 6/6, or a 4/4 right off the bat. -1, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Fine. Potentially a big whoop depending on what your opponent's playing. -7, until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. That is presumably going to be a bare minimum of +2/+2 and trample, but potentially way more. Also, notably, if you full pay this, she can just instantly do that, presumably for a bare minimum of +4/+4 trample to the team. This will end games like a Craterhoof Behemoth, basically, if it gets that late in the game. She's fantastic. There's not much to say here for pick order other than it's an obvious first pick. You do want to make sure you're getting to, potentially 7 mana, maybe 6 mana. I think even paying 4 life and playing her on 5 is fine. Make sure you have some mana dorks or something. Make sure you're ramping just a teensy tiny bit. Make sure you're playing creatures because she definitely wants a little bit of a go-ish wide strategy, but she is going to just crush games. Easy first pick for Nissa. Up next is Noxious Assault. Noxious Assault is 3 green for a sorcery at uncommon. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. This is also going to end games out of nowhere. If you have been dealing poison to your opponent, you've been doing damage to them, so their life total is hurting a bit. You've been dealing poison to them, so they've been getting closer to 10 poison counters. And then you drop this on an attack with, 3, 4, 5 creatures, and they're going to have to make some very serious decisions where they might die if they don't block, and they also die if they block, which is, fun fact, one of my least favorite designs in Magic ever. Gives me terrifying memories of Afflict. But yeah, this card's going to do some work. However, it obviously does require some building around. You must be in a deck that is planning to kill somebody with poison. You must be in a deck that is looking to curve out and fill the board. You can't be playing a, reactive deck. You can't be playing a deck that's going to be playing a bunch of blockers or defenders. I don't think we've seen a defender actually, or something that's not going to be playing precisely into this card. So I don't think you pick it early, but I think you get a little bit rewarded if you do pick it early. You have kind of locked yourself into what you're doing, or you just need to consider this a wasted pick. So I don't quite know exactly where I want to pick it, but it is ludicrously powerful in the right deck. Up next is Oil Gorger Troll. Oil Gorger Troll is 3 green for a creature Phyrexian Troll Warrior at common. It's a 3/4. When Oil Gorger Troll enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. Then, if you control a permanent with an oil counter on it, draw a card. So there are only 3 common cards in green that will have oil counters on them. There's a few more at uncommon. So you probably want to pair this into an archetype where the other color is also pretty into oil counters. Red-green looks like that's going to be one of the big places for it. But this card's going to do a bit of work for you, drawing that card and gaining 3 life. That's a nice bit of value. 5 mana for a 3/4 is a little bit more than I'm super happy to pay though, so I'm never going to load up on these. I think I'm happy to play the first if I assume I'm always going to be able to draw the card because I have that much oil. If I'm not always drawing that card, or even worse, if I'm never drawing that card, this is extremely filler and I'm going to look to not play it, but still not feel awful if I do. That said, this is a low pick. It's in the 6th through 8th range. You can probably even get the one that you want on the wheel. Even if I'm drawing a card all the time, I don't know that I'm playing 2 of these. 5 mana is just a lot for something that's just drawing me a card and gaining some life, because a 3/4 is not typically going to be busting the game wide open. Up next is Paladin of Predation. Paladin of Predation is 5 green for a 6/7 creature Phyrexian Knight and uncommon with Toxic 6. Also, it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. This is terrifying, except, of course, for the fact that it costs 7. 7 is brutal in almost every limited format. You need to have a clear plan of getting to 7 lands while not dying, and yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. Make sure you're playing some Armored Scrap Gorgers. Make sure you are somehow getting to 7 mana very consistently, and preferably a turn or 2 early. If you are, you can certainly play this card, and it's going to do a lot of work. If you cannot do that, if your plan to get to 7 mana is draw and play 7 lands, you probably shouldn't put this card in your deck. So just be aware of that. It's going to be deck dependent. I'm going to pick this up probably never in pack 1 unless I get it on the wheel. Pack 2 or pack 3, once I have proven to myself that I'm going to be able to cast it, I'll pick it a lot higher. But pack 1, I'm just not touching this. It's way too much mana to invest myself into, hoping that I'm getting primarily other uncommons in future packs to actually be able to play it. Up next is Plague Nurse. Plague Nurse is 3 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Cleric at common. It's a 3/4 with Toxic 2. Pay 2 and a green. Each other creature you control with Toxic gains Toxic 1 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. Couple of notes here. It does say other creatures you control, so it will not give itself Toxic 1. Toxic stacks, so Toxic 2 and Toxic 1 will deal 3 poison counters, so you add those numbers up. Other note is these are not separate instances of toxic or poison happening. So if there's something that's going to put on like an extra poison counter each time somebody gets some number of poison counters, it doesn't matter how many instances of Toxic 1 they have or how many different things have Toxic 1 that hit. It's just going to be one lump sum of poison counters. This card is pretty okay if you are in the Toxic deck. 4 mana, 3/4 Toxic 2 is all fine there. And of course, the more Toxic you're playing, the better it is, especially if maybe you're playing some Toxic Flyers, because a lot of the Toxic Flyers, possibly all the Toxic Flyers, are Toxic 1, which is a slowish clock. But if you have a couple that now are Toxic 2 for just a 3 mana investment, that's going to be a ludicrously fast clock. So if your plan is to kill them with poison, this is going to be a huge part of that plan. If you are a green deck that is not caring about Toxic too much, maybe you're a little bit more into the oil counters, this is filler in that case. So regardless, I think I'm picking this up in the 6th through 8th pick range, and pushing that up a little bit, pack 2, pack 3, if I'm definitely looking to poison my opponent out. Up next is Predation Steward. Predation Steward is 1 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Elf Warrior at common. It's a 2/2. Predation Steward enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Pay 2 and a green, tap, remove an oil counter from it. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This thing also kind of looks like it's flying. It looks like it's on like some sort of like flying glider thing, or at least it does in the art, with it being not fully zoomed in for me. Anyways, it's a 2/2 for 2 that can attack as a 4/4. No, it can't, because it has to tap itself. So I guess you can throw that +2/+2 on your tramplers or on your flyers or on your otherwise evasive threats. This is pretty filler, I think. Yeah. I don't see this being anything other than filler. It's a lot of mana investment to get doing this, and you're taking a blocker off, and if you can take your blocker off, you're probably already ahead. Is that +2/+2 really getting you that much more ahead? Yeah, very filler. I think you can pick this up on the wheel. I'm never going to feel bad playing it, but I'm not going out of my way, and I'm not spending real picks. Up next is Rustvine Cultivator. Rustvine Cultivator is a single green mana for a creature Phyrexian Elf Druid at common. It's a 1/2. Tap, put an oil counter on it. Tap, take an oil counter off of it, untap target land. Very, very slow mana dork. It's a mana dork every other turn, essentially, which is not the worst. It's also not the best. I'm going to pick these up pretty low, and I'm probably happy to play one in any green deck, but I'm never really going to load up on these unless I have some sort of big mana plan, Paladin of Predation or whatnot. So yeah, I think I'll pick these up on the wheel because I'm only ever going to want one if I even do. And being a common, I can just get that one. So yeah, I'll pick this up on the wheel. An every other turn mana dork is slow, but is still a mana dork. And it doesn't even have to be every other turn, right? You can put the oil counter on it and then not use it until the turn that you really need to get ahead on curve or something. So yeah. Up next is Ruthless Predation. Ruthless Predation is 1 and a green for a sorcery common. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. Sorcery hurts this quite a lot. It's still fine. It's still part of Green's removal suite. You'll still pretty happily play a couple of these if you can get them, but you're not spending as high of a pick on these. It's not like Infected Bite or whatever it was, the Rabid Bite variant. Keep that in mind. Don't try to cast this as an instant. You'll feel really sad. But +1/+2 is a nice bit of toughness boost. That's always what kind of turns a fight spell from being somewhat mediocre to being somewhat decent. I'll pick these up kind of in the 6th through 8th range. You have to have a creature. You have to have a creature that's big enough. You have to be willing to do this at sorcery speed. There's a bunch of caveats on it, but I'll still happily play a couple. Up next is Skysiphon Golfer. Skysiphon Golfer is 5 and a green for a creature Phyrexian Beast at common. It's a 6/5 reach trample, and it can't be blocked by creatures with flying. That's a real big thing, but you're paying 6 mana for it. It is almost a Colossal Dreadmaw. It's just not quite a 6/6 for 6. 6/5 for 6 is somewhat similar. Can't be blocked by creatures with flying is honestly just random text on it. Sometimes that'll be cool, and a lot of the times it just doesn't matter. The reach is cool that this can be defensive if you need to, if you have a flyer that's kind of getting close to killing you, and also is decently aggressive with those stats and the trample. So I think this is fine. I think you can happily play one in your green decks, especially if you're ramping a little bit. I'm going to be pretty hesitant about playing more. You just can't play many 6-drops in a limited deck. So I'll pick this up pretty close to the wheel, low 6th through 8th range, we'll say. Common big green thing. We're pretty used to that. Up next is Sylvac Battle Chair. Sylvac Battle Chair is 4 green for an artifact equipment at uncommon. 4 Mirrodin. Equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has trample. So this is our Colossal Dreadmaw. This is our 6/6 trample for 6. Cool. Dreadmaw's good. Only way Dreadmaw isn't good is if this is like a turn 5 format. Hopefully it's not a turn 5 format. It might be. The re-equip cost is ludicrous. Hope that your Dreadmaw just doesn't die, I guess. But the ability late game, if you're there, is nice to have. If the game does go a little bit long, being able to equip this chair to something bigger than a 2/2 will be pretty nice. I'll pick this very highly. I think in probably the 4th, 5th pick range. I'll push it a little bit higher in pack 2, pack 3 if I have picked up, armored scrap gorgers and ways to make sure that I'm going to be able to re-equip this, and re-equipping this won't, brutally cost me. But yeah, pretty dang good card. Good to see Dreadmaw back, even if it is now a gamer chair. Up next is Thirsting Roots. Thirsting Roots is a green mana sorcery at common. Pick one. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, or proliferate. If you're splashing, you can play this, and it'll help you splash. If you're not splashing, I can't imagine why you would ever play this ever. I would never play a card that just says proliferate. That's not good enough. I'm not looking to go find a land and put it into my hand for the cost of an entire card, unless I'm splashing. So yeah, if you're splashing, pick this up. If you're not, do not play it. You should be able to get this well into the wheel. Up next is Thrun, Breaker of Silence. Thrun is 3 green for a legendary creature Troll Shaman at rare. It's a 5/5. It can't be countered. It's got trample. Thrun can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. So it's like hex-proof against everything but green. And as long as it's your turn, Thrun's also indestructible. Thrun's obviously a first pick here. 5 mana, 5/5 trample. Can't be countered is pretty irrelevant in limited. Can't be the target of non-green spells is going to be really good in limited at random. And then, yeah, being indestructible is also decent. This card's just great all around. Every word on it is good. First pick it. Up next is Titanic Growth. Titanic Growth is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. We've seen Titanic Growth a number of times. It's always an okay combat trick. Obviously plays a lot better with trample, a lot better with flyers, a lot better with some kind of evasion. This will help you get some reach to end the game if you need it. That said, it's still just a combat trick. You should pick it up on the wheel, and you can play it, but there's also better things you can play than just a combat trick. Up next is Tyronax Atrocity. Tyronax is 3 green for a creature Phyrexian dinosaur at common. It's a 4/4 with haste and toxic 3. 5 mana 4/4 haste is fine. Toxic 3 out of nowhere if your opponent has, shields down, or if you're curving out or whatnot. This is going to end games very fast. It's a pretty good card. It's definitely in the pre-wheel range for me, kind of the 6th through 8th. It's a 5-drop, so you got to be a little bit careful about loading up on these. Of course, you're playing green, so if you've got some dorks, that problem goes down quite a bit. This seems like a pretty premium green common for the green plan of murdering your opponent. Up next is Tyronax Rex. Tyronax Rex is 4 green for a creature Phyrexian dinosaur at Mythic. It's an 8/8, can't be countered, trample, ward 4, haste, toxic 4. Absolutely unreasonable. Thankfully, I guess it costs 7, but there's mana dorks, there's ramp spells, there's way to get this out a little bit earlier. This card is a snap first pick, obviously. Make sure you're playing green. Make sure that green is, not your splash color or something. But as long as you're playing green, and preferably with a bit of mana dorks, this is going to be a must be answered immediately or your opponent is dead card. It's the big green mythic of the set. First pick it. Up next is Tyvar's Stand. Tyvar's Stand is X and a green for an instant at uncommon. Target creature you control gets +X/+X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Yet again, even more versatility in cards is something that I like. I like those decisions. I like when cards can be good early game and when cards can be good late game. I think it makes for some interesting design or interesting choices in game. It's a design decision that I like. So this is a, kind of fireball, essentially, in green. If my opponent didn't block that creature in particular, and I've got 7 mana, congrats, opponent. You're taking an additional 6 damage from that creature that you didn't know about. Get wrecked. It's going to work. It's going to end games. It's going to be brutal to play against. It's an uncommon, which means that you shouldn't necessarily expect your opponent to have it. And there's often not a lot that you can do against it anyways, other than having an instant speed removal or bounce up. But more than that, if you're not on the offensive, if a random fireball combat trick is not going to win you the game because you're blocking, you're in trouble or whatnot, you can use it defensively for +X/+X, or you just cast this for 1 mana, and it's basically a Ranger's Guile or a hexproof combat trick. Your opponent's casting removal on something, you got a green mana, boom, counter it. It's a green counter spell. It's a green counterspell. It's a green fireball. Green is every color now. I like this card a fair bit. I'm going to pick it decently highly-ish in kind of the 4th, 5th pick range. It's not removal, and it's not a bomb. So I'm not spending a first pick on this. I'm not spending a second or a third usually, but I think I'll pick this up in the fourth, fifth pick range. I really like the versatility of it. Up next is Unnatural Restoration. Unnatural Restoration is 1 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Proliferate. I tend to prefer if these cards are instant rather than sorcery, but it is really cheap, so this is fine by me. Being able to buy back your bomb or buy back your evasive threat that'll end the game or buy back a combo piece or buy back something important is pretty decent. The Proliferate is just gravy on top of it. I don't like to spend high picks on these is the problem. Like I'm never first, second, third, fourth, fifth picking these, which is probably why I don't get to play with them much. But I'll happily play it if I can find it. This is something that I'm probably going to pick decently high second or third pack when I'm already certainly in green. This does not pull me into green in any way, shape, or form. It's a reward for me being in green, basically. Up next is Venerated Rot Priest. Venerated Rot Priest is a single green mana for a creature Phyrexian Druid at rare. It's a 1/2 with Toxic 1. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. This is pretty cute. 1/2 for 1 is, okay, whatever. Toxic 1 on it, okay, whatever. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell, so you can target your things with, your Tyvar's Stand or your Titanic Growth or whatnot. You'll get in for the damage, and you'll also give your opponent an extra poison counter. I don't think that's all that important, because if you're just casually casting Titanic Growth left and right, your opponent's probably dead to a large amount of damage being dealt to them. That extra poison counter won't have done all that much. What I do like is this is sort of insurance or extortion, I guess, against your opponent, because if they want to kill your things, they have to take a poison every time they kill something. Otherwise, they have to use removal on this in order to, A, still take 1 poison, but stop taking poison on the other stuff. And if your opponent's using their removal on a 1/2 for 1, well, that's great too. This seems like a decent card. It's certainly going to be in my first pick range, but it's not the first pick that I'm happy about exactly. Like, this is not winning me a game. It's not even efficient, really. It's just a 1/2 for 1. But I like the pressure that it puts on my opponent. It's a pressure card rather than being a bomb or an efficient card or something like that. So I'll first pick it. Obviously, I still want to be in the I'm going to poison my opponent plan, because if they have to take 3, 4, 5 poison by killing my stuff, but I'm not pushing any more poison on them, big whoop. But yeah, I'll first pick it. Up next is Venomous Brutalizer. Venomous Brutalizer is 2 green for a creature Phyrexian Knight at uncommon. It's a 4/4 with Toxic 3, and when it ETBs, you can pay 1 and a green, and if you do, proliferate. 4 mana 4/4 Toxic 3, pretty scary. And if I have that extra 2 mana, possibly just getting a free extra poison counter on my opponent or oil counters or whatever it may be is going to be pretty good too. This seems like a pretty high pick, up in the high 4th, 5th pick range. Probably second or third, obviously. Pack 2, pack 3 when you're in green. Real good. Real good stats, cost, rules text ratio there. Our second last card is Viralspawning. Viralspawning is 2 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Create a 3/3 green Phyrexian Beast creature token with Toxic 1. Corrupted. This has flashback for 2 and a green. So a 3/3 Toxic 1 for 3 is fine. These days that's probably filler, maybe slightly filler plus. You'll play it, but you're not running to grab it. Assuming you're getting your opponent corrupted, though, the fact that this is 2 3/3s for 3, or I guess a 3/3 for 3 twice, is much better. That's very efficient. 1 card being 2 cards, of course, is not my favorite game design decision in Magic, as I've talked about a lot, but this will be a pretty decent card in that case. And it looks like green is certainly going to be getting people corrupted on the way to killing them by poison. Green's plan is not get them corrupted and then win the game some other way. It's get them corrupted, but also tack on another 7 poison. And these will help you get there. So decently high pick in the 4th, 5th pick range, I think, so long as you're playing poison. Our final card for the day is Zapalral Hunger Dominus, 5 green for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror at Mythic. It's a 4/6 with Reach, so a 7 mana 4/6 Reach. Really overcosted, not super interested in that. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. Well, that's pretty stupid now, ain't it? This is a 7 mana 8/12 Reach. And every other creature you have is doubled. Your Brutalizer is an 8/8. Even your Venerated Rot Priest is a 2/4. This one is very nutty. Phyrexian green, and sack 2 other creatures to put an indestructible counter on it. I would like to be doing that as quickly as possible, although sacking 2 other creatures is a pretty big cost. Odds are it's just going to be better to keep those 2 creatures around with doubled power and murder your opponent. But this is an easy first pick. The slight caveat here is make sure you can cast it. Make sure you're going to get to 7. Make sure you've got a mana dork. This is a great place for that common every other turn mana dork to make sure you can get this out maybe a turn earlier, or at least guarantee it comes out on 7. Fantastic card. First pick it. Make sure you can cast it. So that's going to wrap it up for green. Green looks stupid. There's a lot of really good stuff in green. Currently, this is looking to me to be the absolute best color by a mile, especially because it's just going to end the game through poison really quick. Let me know what you think of green. Let me know what you think of these cards in the comments down below. Any comments, questions, etc., you can certainly let me know down there. Make sure you click that like button if you enjoy the video. If you're not subscribed, please click subscribe. It really helps the channel out. You can find me over at twitch.tv/themanaleak, where I stream Magic every Wednesday. This Thursday, I'll be streaming Phyrexia All Is One early access drafting before pre-release even happens. Not that most people will care, but when Kerbal Space Program 2 comes out, you better bet I'll be streaming that on some other day other than Wednesday. So if that's up your alley, come hang out and watch little green men explode in their rockets. But let me know anything you want to let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time for the final set review.